So, hello everyone, welcome back to Soul Symbols, where we explore astrology, myth, symbol, and the deeper patterns moving through our sky. So, this week, beginning the 18th of May, we move through a really lively, quickened, and mentally charged piece of astrology. The tone of the week is going to be changing quite dramatically as we start off, because Mercury has entered Gemini and the Sun is following. And both Mercury and the Sun are going to be meeting with Uranus in the very early degrees of the sign. So you're going to feel some changes of energy here. We're moving from that slower, fertile, embodied terrain of Taurus into some restless air of Gemini. So we could look at it like we're moving from the garden, chilling in the garden into a crossroads. That substance of Taurus, the earthy substance, is becoming an airy signal to us this week. So questions about value, stability and sustaining that belong to Taurus are now going to morph into the question of what is being said, heard, what's changing, and what new information is beginning to move through the field. So this is a week where the mind is going to be awakened before we get that full clarity, before that full light comes to us. So let's have a quick look at the charts here. I'll just get them up 1 second. Here we are. So Mercury, you can see Mercury entering Gemini here. And Mercury is in his own sign, so really important here, because in Gemini, the energetics here become quick and agile, articulate, curious, changeable, but also here, Mercury, we get this wittiness, this quick sense of humour and inventiveness. So this is Mercury in one of his strongest places here in Gemini. And in these very early degrees, Mercury is also, if you look here, in his own bound. So this is giving the messenger here, good old Mercury, the messenger, a lot of authority. Mercury can speak here and translate. And there's going to be this sense of connecting one thing to another. So he can take the scattered pieces of a situation and begin to form language around them. But we can see here, as he's in Gemini, that, Uranus is just beside. So on the 18th, Mercury's meeting with Uranus, and our mind is going to be a bit like a live wire here. So it's one of the defining signatures of the week, Mercury and Uranus together here. So it can bring that lightning quick mind, sudden insight, flash of originality. So yeah, look for messages, unexpected messages, look in the not so obvious places. There can be a strange joke or someone jokes about something that's revealing something true. We can have a bit of a feel of the court jester here this week with Mercury and Uranus, but it can feel like information arriving really quickly and much quicker than we're able to fully process. So you might have thoughts coming out of nowhere, solutions suddenly appearing, or a new phrase and idea that opens a door that may have felt locked before. And then I'm going to take you here, and just so I can get the charts down and speak on camera to you, we have the Sun moving here into Gemini. So we're out of Taurus season, which feels quite strange because we've just had a new moon in Taurus. Okay, they're all happening at the very late degrees of the sign, have been for a while and will continue to do so. So we have those new moons and then we move into the next sign. But again, here is the Sun moving into Gemini, into the bounds of Mercury and ruled by Mercury here. Okay, so there's the picture of it. I'm going to get you back and have a further look at what this means to us. Okay, this is the event of the week. Okay, so this Mercury meeting Uranus here in his own sign, in Mercury's own sign and in his own bounds, this brings a kind of brilliance here and an inventiveness. But I said before, there's humour. We can have a bit of play here. It's the archetype of the poor, the youth. It's that youthful, quick-witted, flighty energy. Okay, so yeah, get into your humour this week. And there's possibilities here as well of intellectual breakthroughs, mental breakthroughs here. So Mercury in Gemini loves the play of language, the pun, the double meaning, the sideways path. Mercury, is the magician in the tarot, so he can be a bit of a trickster, bit edgy, but that's that kind of energy. I can kind of feel it as I'm looking at the charts. Uranus as well here is going to electrify everything, all that Mercury does here. So it's going to make the mind almost leap. Uranus will be shaking loose old patterns of thought. So it can break open a prison of any kind of fixed ideas and thinking here. But because this is so also mentally stimulating, it can be agitating. We've got to look at the shadow of all this. Mercury and Uranus can really make our nervous systems feel wired. Okay, so thoughts might come to you quickly, and you might have an idea that multiplies into like 10, 20 more. So our minds are likely to struggle this week to actually come to rest. So there can be a scatteredness in our thinking, a restlessness, and we can definitely feel overstimulated. We can be full of plans, words, possibilities, but unfocused, not sure where to place our attention because so much information is going through our minds. And as I said, this conjunction with Uranus, Mercury and Uranus, is happening in the beginning, in Mercury's bounds, and in the first face of Gemini, which is ruled by Jupiter. Okay, it's that first decan. So the Mercury-Uranus signature has got that Jupiterian flavour. So it's expansion. So all those things I said about overstimulation, masses of ideas, like rapid nervous system activation, okay, it's going to get bigger. It's going to get bigger. So there's big ideas here as well. So it can bring a sense of a really inspired mind, inspired intellect. Good for your communications here, good for researching and looking for that big idea that you want to run with. It's inspired intellect and that far-reaching thought that we can have here. We may get sudden glimpses of a wider pattern. Be open to all that. Jupiter and Mercury, although they sit opposite in their signs, it's big picture and details. Okay, so it can be wonderful for learning, speaking, teaching, writing, researching, definitely for creating, but it can also become excessive. We need to keep an eye on that. There can be too much information and talking and enthusiasm. Think of the computer with like 10,000 tabs open. Our minds can feel like that this week. And when I was looking at the symbolism of all this, that first face of Gemini, that first decan, is also associated with the Eight of Swords in the tarot. And that card gives the week a really important layer here. The Eight of Swords is showing the mind surrounded by its own sharp edges, beliefs, thoughts, narratives, arguments, fears, inherited ideas. They're all going to be standing around like blades, okay? And if we look at the figure in the card, there's that sense of being bound, but that binding is connected to perception. So it can be our minds getting entangled. And what a surprise with Jupiter amplifying, this rapid energy that's coming through Mercury and Uranus getting together. So this conjunction can bring a sudden recognition of where thought had trapped us, if we look at that symbolism of the Eight of Swords, so where we're caged in. So it can reveal to us a story that we might have been living inside, a narrative. It can show us where we have confused a familiar thought with the truth, and it can quite possibly, this coupling in Jupiter in the first decan, interrupt an old mental pattern with a flash of something that contains a lot more freedom for us mentally. And this is where the Sabian symbol for the placement of Uranus in Gemini is really evocative. The symbol is Santa Claus furtively filling stockings hanging in front of the fireplace. And the keynote to the Sabian symbol is rewarded faith in spiritual blessings. I often call Jupiter Santa Claus or Father Christmas energy. Yeah. So really, really struck me the Sabian symbol. It's strange and it's beautiful symbol for this degree that Uranus occupies. So we might expect Uranus in Gemini to be entirely like technological, intellectual, fast, lightning strike, rational. And of course, it can be all of those things. Gemini is that sign of the mind, language, communication, exchange, curiosity, and definitely multiplicity, as well as division. It's the twin, so bifurcation here. But Uranus brings that disruption, awakening, innovation, and sudden change. But this Sabian symbol is giving us an image of a hidden gift, that sense of something arriving very quietly. You know, as adults, we sneak in very quietly and fill those stockings. So something is being placed there while the conscious mind is turned away, probably completely busy with all those thoughts. So there's something that's coming through, that sense of innocence, expectation, imagination, and faith. You know how the children hang their stockings up and they've got all those things. It's innocent. They're full of expectation and excitement. Okay, and they've got that faith there. So this symbol is showing a bit of mystery here. Okay, it's suggesting that some gifts from the unseen world don't arrive through force. They're arriving through a receptivity. Think of the children's receptivity. They know, they're 100% sure their stockings are going to be fat by morning. So there's a sense that these gifts will arrive when the mind has got enough openness to receive without us dissecting the experience. I do it all the time. I'm sure we all do. It's that sense of having a childlike consciousness here. So a part of us that can still imagine and expect and really believe that life can place something unexpected in our stockings. Yeah. So really important for this week. Mercury in Gemini can examine everything. It can name, analyze, translate, argue, categorize. It can turn the whole world into language. And Uranus here might bring a message that arrives indirectly, almost furtively. So watch out for those dreams and passing comments, the jokes that I spoke about earlier, and synchronicity. We might hear something, we might receive that gift of understanding, knowing through a sentence we hear and we can't forget. So it can come through a moment of sudden knowing that comes before our logical, rational, reasoning minds catch up. So the invitation the sky is making to us this week is to pay attention to the edge of our thoughts, to the things that might arrive sideways. What is appearing when you're doing something ordinary, or that phrase keeps repeating? Look for the ideas, sudden ideas that interrupt our old narratives. And that little spark of insight that feels really odd. It can feel odd, can't it, when we get inspiration, but then begins to make sense. Look on the edges of your thinking, of thought. Keep looking at the symbolism. I've gone very symbolic this week. Okay. Gemini is associated with the lovers in the tarot. So that gives us that image of polarity. It's beautiful for Gemini, but also about choice, relationship, duality, that meeting of opposites. And the lovers is so often it's reduced to romance, but symbolically it's far, far wider than that. It's actually about a crossroads moment where our consciousness needs to choose something. So it's that experience of being divided and then asked to come into a more conscious relationship with parts of ourselves that can seem really separate, or strands of thought that are extremely polarized or separate. And I said earlier, Mercury in the tarot is the magician, and that magician, he's the mediator between above and below. He points up, he points below, if you look at that card. And the magician is working with tools, words, symbols, and intentions. So he knows that language has got real power. A word can open a door, it can shape perception, and a symbol can really carry the unseen into solid form for us here. And then, of course, we got Jupiter, as I said, ruling this first decan of Gemini, and that's the Wheel of Fortune. So for me, the wheel reminds us that life turns, that timing matters, and the patterns repeat, change, and return. What appears random might be part of a larger turning. So in this early Gemini space, we've got the Lovers, the Magician, the Wheel of Fortune, and the Eight of Swords. They're all speaking together. We're talking about choice, language, turning, and mental liberation. It's a potent symbolic field, this first decan and this week. After Mercury meets Uranus, he's going to move into a trine with Pluto in Aquarius on the 20th of this week. So this is bringing the depth here. So the mind's not just skimming over the surface, it's begins to penetrate things. So Mercury in Gemini can gather all the pieces together, and then we have Pluto in Aquarius revealing the deeper architecture beneath them. It's air speaking to air, so our minds are speaking to system, and language is speaking to the collective field. That's the Aquarian feel to it. So this week, we could find powerful moments for seeing what sits beneath public collective narrative. Also look towards group dynamics and technological systems, but we may see this, a social pattern around us within our families or our social groups, or a personal thought loop. So Mercury in trine to Pluto can bring investigative intelligence here. It's Scorpionic. I always think of the Scorpio energy as that investigative, but we've got it here. We've got a signature for it here. So it can give us that probe in mind, but also a persuasive voice and that desire to understand whatever it is that's hidden. So this can deepen the Mercury Uranus like lightning strike, flash, disruptive, sudden, and ask, what does this reveal? That sharpness, that flash, what is it revealing about the system underneath, be that ours or out in the collective somewhere? And because Pluto is in Aquarius, it has got that collective feel. Aquarius is speaking of networks, groups, society, systems, ideals, futures, technology. So it's all those larger structures that connect us here. And then we got Gemini that's going down to the details here, the words, the media, movement, transport, education, information. So that trine between Mercury and Pluto may expose how information is moving through the collective mind. It might show the power behind the message and any machinery behind narratives and story. So we're looking for the pattern behind the noise here, because there's definitely going to be noise. It's Gemini and Mercury is floating through there. Okay, there'll be noise, believe me, and a lot of it will be in here in our heads. Looking at that personal level in our heads, it could help us to really understand our own thinking more honestly. It could have us questioning, why does this particular idea have such a charge for me, or a conversation feel so powerful? It can also show us why we are magnetized and drawn towards topics, or resisting any new piece of information. A sense of resistance. It's like, oh, go away. Yeah. So Mercury and Pluto together can take us beneath quick answers that Mercury in Gemini tends to bring, and into that real deep current. Then on the 21st, as I showed you, the Sun enters Gemini. So that's the light itself moving into Mercury's sign of Gemini. So it's the next stage of the week. So with that Mercury already entering Gemini and meeting Uranus, our minds already received a shock, a disruption, a message signature, and that strange gift I talked about, the sideways gift. And then the sun will arrive and begin to illuminate that same territory. Okay, the sun brings clarity and illumination here. So the sun is bringing that life force into the realm of thought, language, movement, and exchange. And we can think of the marketplace here. We can become more aware of how we're communicating, what we're learning, either consciously or somewhat unconsciously, and who we're speaking to, what ideas are shaping our direction. These are the things that the sun probably will illume for us. So it's beginning the final phase of spring. In Gemini, he's moving towards the summer solstice, and that is where the days begin to get shorter at the height of summer. That dominance of light apparent, but the seasons change. It's the turning point where the light is going to reach its height and begin its long, long descent. So Gemini is a double-bodied, immutable sign, mutable air. So it belongs in that in-between place. It's between spring and summer here. So it's clever, useful, it's expressive, rational, magical, chaotic. You get that inventiveness and changeability with Gemini. So it can carry, we can look at it like carrying the pollen of ideas, like the bees, from one place to another. And it can also scatter seed through speech and open half a dozen doors at once. I'm just trying to express the energetics of this. So the sun is going to be conjoining Uranus on the 22nd. So it brings the week's earlier Mercury-Uranus message into fuller visibility. So that was the flash of the mind. The sun-Uranus is the light of awakening and clarity. So what can that bring? The sun can bring heightened needs for freedom, autonomy, individuation. It is about life force and expressiveness. So it can bring our desires to live more truthfully. And we may have the ability to express something really unique here and break out of any old patterns that we've been trapped in, that Eight of Swords tied up. So we're less bound by expectation. We can have creative breakthroughs, unexpected opportunities, and that sense of rebirth, and a sudden recognition of the self beyond the old script, the old stories, the old narratives. It's beautiful energy. As always, I like to say the shadow, because it's the light and dark makes the whole pie, doesn't it? Sun Uranus can be really willful, energetic. So if your children are being really willful, you can blame Sun Uranus this week, just for the week though. But it can also be erratic and overly attached to independence here. So that can complicate cooperation if our urges for freedom become to extremities. So again, if you're dealing with people who are not cooperating, it could be underneath that could be that strive for independence. Yeah, it could be that archetype's very alive in them there. So really, our question is, what is the awakening asking for? Where is it that we genuinely need freedom? And where is our ego just reacting against a limitation? Sometimes limitation comes from necessity. There's something further we need to go. If we come up to a brick wall, we can't go forward. Okay, we can only go down. It's that kind of energy. So don't take limitation as a bad thing. Uranus can bring that sense of liberation, but it can also feel really destabilizing. So it wakes us up, shakes us up, interrupts the expected path often. And the sun meeting Uranus can bring a really strong feeling of, I need to be myself. That's really healthy. It's necessary. It's life-giving, but it can also arrive really suddenly with heat and intensity before the rest of us has time to adjust to these different feelings. So again, Mercury is very important here. We need language for that sense of awakening in us, and we need the curiosity to look at it, but also space to think, speak and listen. So we will need to notice the difference between revelation and our nervous system reaction here. So there's a sense of allowing insight to move through our bodies before turning it into some dramatic decision. Okay, so it's asking for a little bit of reflection. Let's say it's not just Mercury in the sun, it's a bit of a week of ingresses. We've got on the 19th, before the sun meets Uranus, we've got Venus entering Cancer and we've got Mars entering Taurus. So as the sun and Mercury move into that charged Gemini field, Venus and Mars are moving into water, that Cancer and the Earth, Taurus. So Venus is entering Cancer, so that's we're looking at care, memory, home protection. It's that sense of belonging and emotional safety for us. And Mars is entering Taurus, so we've talked a lot about that over the past few weeks. So we're talking land, body, resources and endurance, value, appetite with Mars here. You know, Mars brings desires and appetite. Mars has been in his own sign in Aries, so that's fiery, fast, forceful. You can go back and look at some of the videos I did on that. But as Mars enters Taurus, the pace is going to change here. Mars in Taurus is slower. It's heavier, more grounded in a sense. It brings a stubbornness. And Mars is usually quick. It will slice through, cut that down. You know, it's the Tower card. So it can be a bit like a bulldozer, Mars, but it is slower and heavier. So it's the energetics of Mars in Taurus is the archetypal landscape is a concern with what can be held, what can be owned, what is it we need to defend and sustain. And Mars is in Venus's sign here. So we've got the warrior entering the train of the body, the field, the garden, our money, our purse, the table, the throat, the senses. And Venus is in Cancer, so she's receiving Mars by sign. Taurus is Venus's sign. And the sextile between them gives the week a really grounding thread here. So amid all that, I can feel it in my body as I talk about it. So amid that Gemini electricity, there is a real call for us to come back into the body. So the really solid things, you know, our homes, a good meal, get into the garden, really sense that grounded emotional base here. And Venus in Cancer is going to be asking what needs tenderness. You might need some tenderness this week, okay? Mars in Taurus is asking, really will want to know what the practical action is. So together they can help us make something safe. So we might be able to repair something this week or protect, nourish something and tend to the physical life that supports the mind. We go in mind, communication, blah, 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 lightning flash, but also grounded in the body, in the earth. This for me is really essential with that Gemini Uranus story. It can be all signal, as I said, and Venus and Mars are reminding us that we've got bodies, needs, homes. It will really remind us that we've got the nervous systems that require care. So if you feel your nervous system, if you feel that agitation that could come archetypally in that archetypal landscape, we can ground back in those things. Our relationships, for instance, they need to be more than a load of ideas or fantasy. And we've got feelings that when they're in difficult places, they can't always be solved by cleverness, that cleverness of Mercury in Gemini. So we've got a really striking shape and landscape for this week. We've got Mercury receiving lightning, Pluto deepening a message, the sun brings all of that into the light, and then Venus and Mars gives us earth and water to hold that charge. So if you're looking for a bit of contemplation this week, I'd say stay with that Sabian symbol, that image of the hidden gift, Father Christmas, Santa Claus, whatever you call him. quietly filling the stockings by the fire. So it's a blessing placed in the ordinary world. There's that, we've got that beautiful fantasy of Father Christmas that is like a message from the unseen, and it's arriving through that simple image. So we've got a blessing being placed in the ordinary world, and that message from the unseen arriving through a simple image. So our rational minds might want to stare directly at it, okay, explain it, prove it, control it. But the symbol is saying that the gift may be received more truly through innocence, openness, sideway vision. So sometimes what you see in your peripheral vision, you know, it's not sharp, but it adds to the sense of wholeness here. So when we're moving through this week, notice unexpected messages and conversations that spark something in us. We can open ourselves to notice sudden thoughts that changes the room we're standing in. But really important, notice the restlessness in your body when your mind's moving too quickly. That'll be your nervous system, like, Rrr. And also notice any new language that wants to emerge through you. And that doesn't necessarily mean words, it could be creative language. And notice where a mental binding, that Eight of Swords, begins to loosen. So what would I say? The symbols, the images we've got, well, we got the Lovers asking us to choose consciously. We've got the Magician asking us to speak with care. And we got the Wheel of Fortune reminding us that the moment is turning. Then we have the Eight of Swords that is going to show us where the mind has mistaken its own enclosure, its own bounding upness. That's not grammatically correct, but that capture, that enclosure has been mistaken for reality. Okay. And the Uranus in Gemini is bringing the lightning that can split that old story open. So what does that mean for us all? Well, by the end of the week, as the Sun meets Uranus, something that began as a thought, Mercury, Gemini, a rumour, a flash, a phrase, or that private recognition might become much clearer to us. The light of the Sun is going to catch up with the message, those flashes of message. What Mercury heard at the beginning of the week, the Sun will begin to reveal it by the end. It will begin to bring illumination and clarity here. So what's the advice? Given all of that lot, and it does sound a lot, keep the mind open, ground yourself and open your heart to have that receptivity to receive a strange gift that might arrive sideways from the peripherals of our experience. So thank you for joining me for this week's astrology. If the reflection really spoke to you, like, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comment. That's what I want more. You can also go across to soulsymbols.co.uk. You can find out a bit more about me. There's about bits and find the work that I'm doing over there. You can also book readings. And all the links will be below in the description box. So until next time, take care of yourself. Listen for those messages beneath all the noise that will probably be around this week. And let the week reveal to you what's ready to be seen. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.